My boyfriend said, "I'm moving out tonight. Don't try to stop me." I replied, "Okay." That one word seemed to offend him more than any argument we'd had in nearly 3 years together. My name is Claire Bennett. Before that night, I honestly believed I was coming home to a life that was strained. Maybe, but still intact. The argument started over something that should not have mattered. At least that was how it looked at first. But after almost 3 years with someone, you learn a painful truth. Small arguments are rarely about the small thing. They are usually about everything that has been waiting behind it. That evening, I got home later than usual. Work had been brutal all week. Deadlines, meetings, emails that multiplied every time I answered one. By the time I finally shut my laptop, drove home through slow traffic, and climbed out of the car, all I wanted was a quiet apartment, a shower, and a few hours where nobody needed anything from me. The moment I opened the front door, I knew something was wrong. The TV was on with the volume low. The sink was full of dishes. 2 takeout boxes from the night before were still sitting on the kitchen counter. The trash bag was tied but overflowing beside the cabinet, like someone had meant to take it out and stopped halfway through. Ryan hated disorder. He was meticulous about the apartment. Counters wiped, laundry folded, pillows straightened. If I left a mug out too long, he would move it without a word. Coming home to that kind of mess told me something before he did. He was sitting on the couch with one leg tucked under him, staring at his phone. The screen lit up his face, but not enough to soften it. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys into the bowl by the door. "Hi." That was it. No smile, no kiss, no long day, just one flat syllable, like he was answering someone he barely knew. I slipped off my shoes and walked toward the kitchen. "You didn't eat yet?" "No." "You were waiting for me?" He gave a small shrug without looking up. "I just didn't feel like cooking." There was something rehearsed about the whole scene. Not explosive, not dramatic, just wrong in a way I could feel under my skin. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter. "Did something happen today?" "No." Too fast. Not defensive enough to sound convincing. Not casual enough to feel real either. I studied him for a second. "Then why does it feel like you're mad at me?" That got his attention. He looked up then, his expression cool and tired all at once. "I'm not mad." "You sure?" "Yes." Then he looked back down at his phone. That was when I knew the conversation wasn't over. It never is when someone says they're not upset in that clipped, distant tone, as if honesty has already become inconvenient. I sat at the small dining table near the kitchen. "What's going on, Ryan?" He let out a long breath, the kind of sigh that sounds like it has been waiting for an audience. "You're never here anymore." There it was. I had heard versions of that sentence before, never loudly, never directly enough to force the issue, but enough to recognize it. "I work," I said calmly. "I know you work." "Then you know why I'm busy." "That's not the point." I twisted the cap back onto my water bottle. "Then what is the point?" He put his phone face down on the couch cushion beside him. Slowly, deliberately, like he had already played this conversation out in his head and had finally reached the line he wanted most. "The point," he said, "is that this relationship isn't working." For a second, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. "What?" "You heard me." I stared at him. "We've been together almost 3 years." "I know." "And suddenly it's not working?" He crossed his arms. "It hasn't been working for a while." That hit harder than I expected, not because relationships never struggle, but because of how settled he sounded, like he had already been living inside that conclusion for weeks and had only now decided to let me in on it. "For you?" I asked. He held my gaze. "Maybe for both of us." I let out a short laugh without humor. "Interesting." His eyebrows tightened. "Why is that interesting?" "Because I didn't realize we were having a funeral for the relationship tonight." His jaw shifted. "Of course you didn't. What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're always working, you're always exhausted, and when you are home, you're barely here." "That's not fair." He sat up straighter. "No? Really?" "Yes, really." My own voice sharpened. "I pay the rent, Ryan. I pay the utilities. I cover your car payment. I buy most of the groceries. I'm the reason this apartment stays comfortable. So don't sit there and act like I've done nothing." The second the words left my mouth, I knew he would hate them. His expression hardened exactly the way I expected. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly the problem." I frowned. "What problem?" "You think because you pay for things, everything else is supposed to be fine." "I never said that." "You don't have to." He stood up then, not quickly, but with the kind of sudden decision that makes a room feel smaller. Everything about him went rigid. "You think responsibility is the same thing as love," he said. "That's not what I think." "Then what do you think?" I stood too, more from instinct than intention. "I think I've been carrying more than you want to admit." His eyes flashed. "And there it is." "What is?" "The scoreboard." I stared at him. "You brought this up, not me." "No, Claire. You just keep proving my point." He turned and walked toward the bedroom. At first, I thought he needed space, that he might cool off, wash his face, come back, and say something reckless he didn't mean. Then I heard the closet doors open. A second later, I saw him pulling clothes off hangers. "What are you doing?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Packing." The word landed strangely, like it did not belong in my apartment or in the middle of an argument that had seemed ordinary only minutes earlier. "Packing for what?" He yanked a duffel bag from the top shelf, dropped it onto the bed, and started throwing shirts into it. "I'm leaving." For a moment, I just stood there, watching him move with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this in private. "You're serious?" "Yes." "You're just walking out like this?" He didn't stop. "Yes." I looked at the half-zipped bag, the open drawers, the cold steadiness in his face. None of it felt impulsive. "And you're not even trying to fix anything?" I asked. He gave a humorless laugh. "Fix what?" Something heavy dropped in my chest. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "I already found another place." I went very still. "You already found another place," I repeated. "Yes." The room seemed to sharpen. "How long have you been planning this?" He didn't answer. He just kept packing. I stepped closer. "How long, Ryan?" He zipped one side of the bag without looking at me. "A few weeks." "A few weeks." So while I was answering emails, paying bills, and trying to keep our life moving forward, he had already been planning his exit in the background, smiling when he needed to, sleeping beside me, letting me think we were only tired, not broken. I watched him throw in a charger, a pair of shoes, a jacket. Then he looked at me and said, "You know what's funny?" I almost didn't answer. "What?" "You're not even trying to stop me." I tilted my head slightly, studying him like I was seeing him from a distance for the first time. "Should I?" I asked. That landed wrong. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened and his fingers stalled on the zipper. "Yes," he said. "People usually fight for their relationships." I let out a slow breath. "People usually talk before they leave." That shut him up for a second. He zipped the bag the rest of the way, harder than necessary, then grabbed it and walked past me toward the front door. I followed, not rushing, not trying to block him, just watching. At the door, he stopped. For a moment, I thought he might turn around for real, that maybe this was the part where something honest would finally come out. Instead, he looked at me over his shoulder. "I'm moving out tonight," he said again. "Don't try to stop me." There was something almost performative about the way he said it, like he needed to hear how final it sounded. I looked at him, really looked, at the man I had built routines around, the man whose habits I knew better than my own, the man who had apparently been planning to leave me for weeks without saying a word. Then I nodded once. "Okay." That one word hit harder the second time. His eyes narrowed. "That's it? That's it? You're just letting me go? Yes?" Something shifted in his face then. Not relief, not satisfaction, confusion. "You don't care," he said. I shook my head slightly. "That's not what I said." "Then what are you saying?" I stepped aside and cleared the space between him and the door. "I'm saying that if you've already decided to leave, there's no point pretending you haven't." He stared at me like he was waiting for something else. Anger, begging. A dramatic confession that would make him feel chosen. But suddenly, painfully clearly, I understood something I had missed until that moment. This wasn't an argument he was trying to fix. This was an exit he had already chosen. "You're unbelievable," he muttered. Then he opened the door and walked out. The door slammed behind him, and the apartment went completely still. No footsteps, no voice, no movement, just silence. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the door like it might open again if I waited long enough. It didn't. The quiet that followed was not heavy in the way movies make it feel. It was empty, clean, like something had already been removed. I walked back into the living room and sat on the couch he had been sitting on minutes earlier. His phone charger was still plugged into the wall. A glass of water sat half full on the coffee table. A jacket he had forgotten to pack was draped over the armrest. 3 years. And that was how it ended. Not with a screaming match. Not with some giant scene. Just a closing door and one word he had not been ready for. Okay. I sat there for a while, replaying the conversation. His tone, his timing, the way he kept watching my reaction, like my response mattered more to him than the decision itself. "You're not even trying to stop me." That was when it clicked. He had not just wanted to leave. He had wanted to leave and still feel chosen. He wanted the option to walk away while still believing I would chase him, argue with him, and give him one more reason to stay. When I didn't, the silence offended him more than anger would have. That realization did not feel like heartbreak. It felt like clarity. I leaned forward, unlocked my phone, and started making decisions of my own. First, I opened my banking app. Ryan had been using 2 authorized cards linked to my account for groceries, gas, and the expenses we had folded into our routine. I canceled both of them. Then I opened the building management app. His digital access was still active. He could walk into the building, come up the elevator, and stand at my door like nothing had changed. I removed his access. Finally, I called a locksmith. "Hi," I said when someone answered. "I need my locks changed tonight." "We can have someone there within the hour." "That works." I hung up and set the phone down. For a second, I just sat there again, staring at the quiet apartment. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like alignment. He had left. So I closed the systems that still assumed he lived there. The locksmith arrived about an hour later. He did not ask questions. He just got to work. Metal clicked. Tools shifted. The old lock came apart piece by piece. I stood to the side with my arms folded, watching something small but important change in front of me. By midnight, it was done. New locks, new keys, a clean line where there had not been one before. I tested the door once after he left, turning the key slowly and listening to the solid click. Secure, final. When I went to bed that night, the apartment felt different. Quieter, yes, but also lighter. I thought that would be the end of it. 2 days later, someone started pounding on my door. At first, it was just loud. Then it became desperate. Bang, bang, bang. "Claire, please, I know you're inside." I froze on the couch, then reached for my phone and opened the security camera app. There he was, Ryan, standing outside my door, crying. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. It didn't feel real. 2 days. That was all it took. 2 days ago, he had walked out of the same apartment with a packed bag and a rehearsed speech, confident enough to tell me not to stop him. Now he was outside my door, red-eyed and tense, knocking like the door might open if he hit it hard enough. "Claire, please, open the door." Another knock, louder this time. I leaned back against the couch, phone still in my hand, watching him through the camera instead of rushing to him the way some softer version of me might have done before. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his jacket, paced once, then came back to the door. "I know you can hear me." Of course I could. That wasn't the point. The point was that for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting. I let him knock again, and again. Each hit against the door sounded less like anger and more like panic. Finally, I stood up and walked to the door, not because I felt bad, not because I wanted to fix anything, because I wanted to hear what he had to say now that whatever plan he had walked out with had clearly failed. I stopped just behind the door. "Why are you here?" There was a pause. Then his voice came through, strained and uneven. "Please, can we talk?" "About what?" "Just open the door." "No." Silence. Then, more quietly, please. 2 days ago, he had told me not to stop him. Now he was asking me to let him back in. I unlocked the door, but I didn't open it fully. Just enough to see him. Up close, he looked worse than I expected. His hair was messy, like he had been running his hands through it over and over. His eyes were swollen, his face was pale, and beneath all of it was something that had not been there when he left: uncertainty. "What do you want, Ryan?" I asked. He swallowed. His eyes flickered past me into the apartment before coming back to my face. I made a mistake. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because of how quickly the words came out. A mistake? Yes. You packed a bag. I know. You told me not to stop you. I know. And now you're here. He nodded. Yes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then his gaze shifted again toward the apartment. Can I come in? No. The answer came out immediately. His face fell. Claire, please, it's cold out here. I'm sure it is. His hand tightened around the strap of his bag. Can we just talk? We are talking. Not like this. I tilted my head. Like what? Through a door. That was when his eyes dropped to the lock. He noticed immediately. It looked different, new, solid. You changed the locks. Yes. His eyes snapped back to mine. Why would you do that? I held his gaze. You told me you were leaving. That doesn't mean you had to lock me out. You locked yourself out. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. After a second, his voice dropped. My card stopped working. I nodded once. Yes. All of them? Yes. The cards linked to my account were canceled. His shoulders sank a little. Why would you do that? Because you moved out, I said calmly. And I shut down the access that came with living here. That included the cards, the building entry, the apartment lock, everything. The silence that followed was not tense. It was empty, like something had finally settled into place between us. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me as though he were trying to find the version of me he expected to come back to. He didn't. Instead, his voice came out quieter than before. I didn't have anywhere to go. That caught my attention. I straightened slightly. What happened to the place you found? His eyes dropped. For the first time since I opened the door, he didn't answer right away. There wasn't one. I frowned. What? He shifted uncomfortably. I thought I was going to stay with someone. Something cold slid into place in my chest. Someone? He hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, my ex. There it was, the missing piece, the reason everything had felt rehearsed, the reason he had been so confident walking out, the reason he had not needed time to figure anything out. He thought he already had. And? I asked evenly. He let out a shaky breath. She changed her mind. Of course she did. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't have to. He nodded slightly, like he could hear the thought anyway. She said it was too complicated. I crossed my arms. So the woman you left me for didn't want you. Don't say it like that. How should I say it? He didn't answer, because there wasn't another version of that sentence. For a second, he just stood there, eyes glassy, breathing unevenly. Then he took a small step forward. Claire, can I come back? No. The word came out before he even finished the question. Sharp, final. His expression cracked. What? You heard me. I said I'm sorry. I heard that too. Then why won't you let me back in? I looked at him for a long second. Not angry, not emotional, just clear. Because you didn't leave in the middle of an argument, I said quietly. You left because you thought you had a better option. That's exactly what happened. He shook his head quickly, panic creeping back into his voice. I was confused. No, I cut in. You were confident. He went still. You packed your things. You told me not to stop you. You already had a plan. His voice broke. I thought you didn't care. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Why? Because you didn't try to stop me. I let out a small, quiet laugh. You told me not to. That doesn't mean you were supposed to listen. For a moment, I just stared at him, because that sentence explained everything. He didn't want honesty. He wanted performance. He wanted to leave and still feel chosen. The hallway felt colder than it should have, not because of the weather, but because whatever illusion had been holding this together was gone. He looked at me like he was waiting for something to change, for my face to soften, for my voice to crack, for me to give him a reason to believe he had not destroyed everything for nothing. You didn't want to fix things, I said quietly. He flinched. That's not true. It is. I held his gaze without raising my voice. You wanted to leave and see if something better worked out. That's not fair. It's accurate. Silence. That word hit him harder than anything else I could have said. I was confused, he tried again, weaker now. No, you weren't. He looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't know where to start anymore. You don't pack a bag and line up somewhere else to stay because you're confused, I said. You do that because you've already decided. His shoulders dropped. I just needed space. You had space. You had time. You had the chance to talk to me. What you didn't have was patience. That's not... You didn't talk to me, I said, cutting him off again. You planned around me. That landed. I saw it in the way he looked down. I didn't know how to say it, he admitted. That's not an excuse. I didn't want to hurt you. I almost smiled at that. But you were willing to risk everything on her? His face tightened. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? He hesitated. That hesitation told me more than any explanation could have. You thought you had a softer landing, I said, and when that disappeared, you came back here. I didn't know what else to do, he admitted. There it was. Not love, not regret, not even guilt. Just no other option. I let that sit between us. Claire, please, he said, his voice cracking. I have nowhere to go. That was the first fully honest thing he had said since he knocked on my door, and it almost would have worked. Almost. 3 years. 3 years of routines, private jokes, shared space, and the kind of familiarity that starts to feel like home. 3 years should have meant something. But standing there, looking at him now, it did not feel like he had lost me. It felt like he had lost access. I'm sorry, he said quickly, stepping closer. I shouldn't have left like that. I wasn't thinking straight. I thought, he trailed off. You thought she was better, I finished for him. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Silence again, heavy this time, because now we were no longer arguing about what happened. We were standing inside it. Can I just come inside? He asked again, softer now. Just for a little while. We can talk. We can figure it out. I shook my head. No. His face twisted, frustration and desperation pulling at each other. Claire, come on. 3 years. You're just going to throw that away? I looked at him for a long second. Then I said the only thing that mattered. You threw it away. The words landed clean. No anger. No dramatic emphasis. Just truth. I didn't... You did, I said. You made a decision. I just accepted it. His breathing turned uneven. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. He ran a hand through his hair and paced once in the narrow hallway before turning back to me. So that's it? You're not even going to help me? No. The answer didn't change. His eyes searched my face like he was trying to find some version of me that would crack under pressure. The version that would still choose him after everything. But she wasn't there anymore. What am I supposed to do? He asked quietly. I didn't answer, because for the first time, that wasn't my responsibility, not my problem to solve, not my life to rearrange. He stood there a few more seconds, waiting. Nothing changed. Finally, something in his posture gave in. Not dramatically, just slowly, like he was finally realizing the door behind me was closed in every way that mattered. Okay, he said. It wasn't acceptance, just exhaustion. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, tightened his grip on the bag, and stepped back. Then again. I didn't think it would end like this, he said, almost to himself. Neither did I. He turned toward the elevator, walked a few steps, and stopped like he might look back. He didn't. Then he kept going. I stood there in the doorway until he disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the door. The new lock clicked into place with a quiet, solid sound. And just like that, it was over. I didn't move right away. My hand stayed on the door for a few seconds, like I was waiting to feel something dramatic. Relief, regret, vindication. But there was nothing like that. Just quiet. Real quiet. The kind that doesn't press on your chest. The kind that doesn't ask anything from you. I turned the lock once more out of habit, even though I knew it was already secure, then walked back into the living room. Everything looked exactly the same. The same couch, the same dim TV light, the same glass of water still sitting on the table from 2 nights earlier, but it didn't feel the same, not even close. I sat down slowly and let my eyes drift across the room. For 3 years, that space had been built around 2 people, 2 routines, 2 expectations, 2 versions of the future that were supposed to fit together. Now it was just mine. And instead of feeling heavier, it felt clear. Like something that had been pulling in opposite directions for too long had finally stopped. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen for a moment. No missed calls, no messages, no new notifications. And yet, I already knew they were coming. Ryan wasn't the type to let things end cleanly. Not after realizing he had nowhere else to go. Not after discovering that the version of me he thought he could return to no longer existed. I set the phone down again without unlocking it. If he reached out, I wasn't answering. That decision didn't come from anger. It came from understanding. For the first time since that argument started, I knew exactly what had happened and why. You thought I didn't care. His voice echoed in my head. That line stayed with me more than anything else he said. Not because it was true, but because it revealed what he had actually wanted. He didn't want communication. He didn't want repair. He wanted proof. Proof that I would chase him, fight for him, break in a way that made him feel important. When I didn't, he filled the silence with a conclusion. She doesn't care. But that wasn't what my silence meant. My silence meant I was finally listening. Listening to the fact that he had lined up an exit before starting the argument. Listening to the part of him that had already stepped out of the relationship while still standing in the room. I leaned back and exhaled slowly. It wasn't that he had never mattered. It was that the version of him I had been holding on to didn't exist anymore. And maybe hadn't for a while. The apartment felt settled now. Not empty, not lonely. Settled. My phone buzzed. Once. Then again. I glanced at it. Ryan. Of course, I didn't pick up. The screen lit up, then went dark. A few seconds later, another buzz. A message this time. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would say. I'm sorry. Can we talk? I didn't mean it. Different versions of the same plea, all trying to undo something that couldn't be undone. The phone buzzed twice more, then stopped. I let the silence stretch. After a while, I got up, went to the kitchen, filled a clean glass with water, and rinsed away the stale taste the apartment had been carrying since that first night. Small things. Simple things. But they felt intentional. Like I was reclaiming a space that had been shared too casually for too long. When I came back into the living room, I picked up the jacket he had left behind. For a second, I held it. The fabric was familiar, comfortable. Then I folded it neatly and placed it by the door, not as an invitation, as a boundary. If he came back for it, he still wasn't coming inside. I sat down again and glanced at my phone. No new messages. Good, because I wasn't going to answer anyway. People always say 3 years, like the number itself, should guarantee value. Like time automatically creates depth. But sitting there in that quiet apartment, I realized something simple. Time doesn't protect a relationship. Choices do. And his choice had been made long before he walked out that door. He just didn't expect me to accept it. 3 months passed. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic rush where everything suddenly made sense. Just slowly. Day by day, the apartment settled into something new. The silence stopped feeling like absence and started feeling like space. My routines adjusted. My schedule stayed just as busy. But when I came home, it finally felt like I was arriving somewhere instead of returning to something that had been quietly pulling apart. Ryan tried to contact me. At first it was calls, then messages, then longer texts that tried to sound thoughtful enough to rewind what had happened. I made a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just need a chance to explain. I read none of them, not because I was trying to punish him, because I already understood the explanation. He didn't leave because he was lost. He left because he thought something better was waiting. And when that disappeared, he came back. There was nothing in his messages that could change that. Eventually, the texts stopped. Then the calls. Then, even the occasional late-night attempt to reach out disappeared too. Silence again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was complete. I heard about him through other people, the way news travels when lives still overlap at the edges. He had stayed with a friend for a while. Temporary, unstable. The kind of arrangement that reminds you very quickly what home actually means. As for his ex, apparently she had never intended for anything real to happen. She liked the attention, the idea of it. But once it became real, once he actually showed up with a bag and expectations and the weight of a decision already made, she backed away. Said it was too complicated. And just like that, the option he thought he had chosen over me disappeared. Fast, clean, final. From what I heard, he tried to reach out again after that. A few more messages, an email. Longer this time, more desperate, still unanswered. Eventually, he stopped. And that was it. No dramatic last conversation, no big scene, just distance. The apartment is quiet now, but it's a different kind of quiet than it was that night. Back then, it felt like something had been taken away. Now it feels like something unnecessary has been removed. I still think about that moment sometimes. Not the argument, not the packing, not even the knocking. Just one sentence. Don't try to stop me. At the time, it sounded like a challenge, like something I was supposed to push against, something I was supposed to disprove. Now I hear it differently. It wasn't a test of how much I cared. It was a reveal of how little he was willing to protect. Because people who truly want to stay don't prepare to leave. They don't build exits in silence. They don't line up another option before ending what they already have. And they don't walk out expecting to be chased. So I didn't stop him. I stepped aside, and I let him go. Because if someone really belongs in your life, they don't need to be convinced to stay. They already chose to.